Good morning, y'all. I want to start this one with some honesty, because I think y'all deserve that after the week this has been. It has been a brutal, relentless, exhausting week of severe weather across this country. We started Monday with tornadoes ripping through Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. We went through Tuesday with a particularly dangerous situation tornado near Union Center, Wisconsin. Homes destroyed, roads impassable, communities shaken. We pushed through Wednesday and Thursday with round after round of large hail, damaging winds, more tornadoes, flash flooding, nearly 100 hail reports, more than 24 tornadoes confirmed across 4 states, just in the first half of the week alone. And then Friday delivered what I called the most dangerous day of the entire outbreak. A 1,000-mile corridor, 34 million people in the threat zone, the full severe weather menu on the table. This week has been the kind of week that tests communities, tests emergency managers, tests forecasters, and tests every person who lives in the path of these storms. And I want every person in the affected areas to know that I have been right here with you through all of it, and I am incredibly proud of how this community has shown up for each other. But here's the thing. Here's the reason I am sitting here recording this video right now instead of taking a breath and stepping back for a day. Because the atmosphere does not look at a community that just cleaned up from one outbreak and decide to give it a pass on the next one. Because the data that I have been watching build over the last 24 hours is pointing clearly and unmistakably toward another significant severe weather setup arriving next week, and not at the tail end of next week. Not as a marginal possibility that I am flagging just to stay ahead of things. A real, potentially significant severe weather setup arriving in the first half of next week, aimed at a region that is going to be sitting on saturated soils, running high rivers, and dealing with the compounding effects of everything this week has already poured onto it. And that combination, a fresh severe weather setup landing on top of a landscape that has already taken a beating, is exactly why I am saying right now, clearly and without hedging, what is coming next week is no joke. And I need y'all to hear that before the weekend, before people exhale, before the guards come down. So let me tell you what the data is actually showing, because that is always where we have to start. The first thing to understand is the pattern evolution happening over the next several days, because the transition from what we just experienced into what is coming next is genuinely one of the more interesting and important meteorological stories I have had to tell in a while. Here's the big picture. The strong cold front that swept through the country this week, the one that produced all of that severe weather and pushed that active trough pattern through the central United States, is going to cross the east coast this weekend and push offshore. Behind it, a Canadian high-pressure system is going to drop southward and build into the eastern half of the country, and that is going to do a couple of things that are very important for next week's setup. For the Northeast and Great Lakes, it is going to bring a genuine cold snap. The Weather Prediction Center is talking about highs mainly in the 40s to lower 50s from Michigan to New England with frost and freeze conditions overnight. For the northern plains, the pattern behind that front is going to feel more like late winter than mid-April. But, and this is the part I need you to hold on to, while all of that cold air is flushing through the eastern United States and the northern tier of the country, something very different is happening out west. A new storm system is arriving on the west coast by Sunday, bringing rain and mountain snow to the Pacific coast states. And behind that system, a broad upper ridge is building between the eastern trough and the new west coast system. That ridge is going to act like a pump, forcing warm air northward out of the Gulf of Mexico and back into the central plains at an accelerating rate as we move through the first half of next week. The Weather Prediction Center's own extended forecast is already explicitly calling for warmth returning to the plains, with highs climbing back into the 80s from western Texas all the way north into Nebraska by Tuesday. Let me put that temperature progression in the context of what it means for severe weather. You take a region that just had cold air flush through it, you let it dry out for 36 to 48 hours, and then you pump 80-degree temperatures back into it from the south ahead of the next incoming trough. That temperature swing, that moisture return, that destabilization rate, that is the recipe. That is what the atmosphere is cooking up for next week. And I have watched this recipe produce significant severe weather events enough times to know that when I see the ingredients assembling this clearly in the extended guidance, it is time to pay attention. Now, I want to be transparent with you about what we know and what we do not know at this range, because honesty is the foundation of everything I do here, and I am not going to pretend that a 7-day forecast carries the same certainty as a 6-hour one. It does not. The details, the exact track of the new storm system, the precise position of the dry line, the exact timing of convective initiation, those things are going to become clearer as we get closer to the event and the high-resolution models can lock in on the specifics. What the models can tell us reliably at this range is the large-scale pattern. And the large-scale pattern for next week is telling a consistent, coherent, concerning story across multiple independent modeling systems. The GFS, the European, the Canadian. They are all in agreement on the broad strokes of what is setting up. A new trough arrives from the west. It taps into the returning Gulf moisture. It interacts with a frontal boundary that is going to have significant temperature contrast across it. And the result is an elevated severe weather threat across the southern and central plains, potentially extending into the mid-Mississippi Valley somewhere in the Tuesday through Thursday timeframe. When I see that kind of model agreement at 7 to 10 days, I do not wait until day 2 to start talking about it. I start talking about it now so that every person in the potential corridor has maximum time to prepare. Let me spend some time on the compounding factor here, because this is the piece of next week's forecast that I think is being underestimated by a lot of people who have not spent time thinking through it carefully. And that compounding factor is the state of the ground, the state of the rivers, the creeks, the soil, across the regions that are going to be in next week's potential severe weather corridor. I have been talking about this concept for years on this channel because I think it is one of the most consequential and least communicated factors in severe weather forecasting. Here's the reality of what the landscape across the southern and central plains and the mid-Mississippi Valley looks like right now after this week. The soil moisture is at or near saturation across large portions of Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, Iowa, and the surrounding states. River and stream gauges that were running near normal at the beginning of this week are now running elevated or in flood stage in multiple locations after days of training thunderstorms and heavy rainfall. Trees across these regions, already stressed by 2 rounds of strong winds this week, are sitting in saturated soil where the root systems have lost their grip on the ground. Infrastructure across these areas, roads, bridges, culverts, has already been strained by the flooding and the heavy traffic of emergency response operations. Now into that landscape, drop another round of severe thunderstorms next week. Even if next week's setup is not dramatically more intense than what we experienced on Tuesday or Friday of this week, even if it is broadly comparable in terms of wind shear and instability, the impacts are going to be amplified by everything the ground underneath it is already carrying. Rainfall that would have soaked into dry soil in August is going to run directly into already swollen creek channels in late April on saturated soils. Trees that would have survived 60-mile-per-hour winds on firm ground in September may not survive 50-mile-per-hour winds on waterlogged ground next Tuesday. This is not an abstract meteorological concept. This is a practical reality that emergency managers across the affected states are already thinking hard about. And it is one that every homeowner, every community leader, every person living near a creek or in a flood-prone area in the potential corridor needs to be thinking about right now. There is something else I need to address head-on here, and that is the concept of severe weather season momentum. The 2026 severe weather season has already been a significant one. We had violent tornadoes in Oklahoma in early March, an EF2 that tragically killed a mother and daughter near Fairview. We had destructive tornadoes in southern Michigan that killed multiple people, including a 12-year-old boy. We had the devastating EF3 that carved a 35-mile path from Kankakee, Illinois, into Lake Village, Indiana, in March, killing 3 people, destroying 30 homes, damaging nearly 500 buildings, and producing a 6-inch diameter hailstone that may set a new Illinois state record. We have had this extraordinary week of outbreak-level activity across the plains and Midwest on top of all of that. The season is not winding down. It is not taking a break. What the pattern is showing is a severe weather season that is operating in high gear right through mid to late April, which is exactly when the peak severe weather threat corridor begins to shift slightly northward and westward as the jet stream gradually lifts with the season. That means the areas that have been dealing with this activity so far are not done, but it also means that communities a little further north and west, Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, are increasingly going to be drawn into the threat corridor as we push through the back half of April and into May. If you are in those areas and you have been watching this outbreak unfold to your south and thinking you have been lucky, I want you to start paying attention right now because the luck portion of that equation is about to get a lot smaller. I want to take a moment and talk about a specific threat type that I have not emphasized enough this week relative to how dangerous it actually is going to be in next week's setup, and that is the flash flooding threat. Y'all, we talk about tornadoes, we talk about hail. Those things are dramatic and visual and they command attention for obvious reasons, but flash flooding, especially in a saturated landscape, especially in the hill country of Arkansas and Oklahoma and the Ozarks of Missouri, kills people every single severe weather season in this country. And it kills them in a way that is particularly tragic because it is so preventable. The mechanism is always the same. The rain starts, the creeks start rising, a road gets water over it, sometimes just a few inches, sometimes more, and a driver looks at it and decides they can make it. Or they are driving in the dark and they do not even see it until the front wheels drop into water that is moving faster and is deeper than anything they imagined, and the car gets swept off the road. And the statistics for surviving a vehicle swept off a road into floodwater are terrifying. 6 inches of moving water can knock a person off their feet. 12 inches can carry a small vehicle. 2 feet can sweep most cars. These are not theoretical numbers. These are the numbers that produce fatalities in every flash flooding event in this country. In next week's setup, the flash flood threat is going to be a primary concern across the Ozark Plateau, the Ouachita Mountains, and the river valleys of Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas. These areas are already at elevated soil moisture. They are going to be receiving another round of significant rainfall. And the terrain in these regions, steep, rocky, channelized, is exactly the kind of terrain where flash flooding develops fastest and gives people the least warning time. Please, if you are in these areas, I'm asking you to make a commitment right now, before next week's storms arrive, that you are not going to drive through any water across a road. Not in daylight, not at night, not on a road you have driven 1,000 times. Not if the water looks shallow. Turn around, don't drown. Every single time, no exceptions. That commitment, made now before you are in the stressful and confusing real-time situation of a flooding road, is the commitment that keeps you alive. Let me also talk about tornado preparedness, specifically for next week, because while the tornado threat is not yet defined at the level of specificity I can give you 2 days out, the atmospheric ingredients assembling in the extended guidance are ones that have historically supported significant tornado events when they have come together in the past. Deep layer wind shear values that the models are hinting at for the Tuesday through Thursday window are in the range that supports supercell organization, and if the low-level shear component is as strong as the current guidance suggests, potentially significant tornadoes. I want to give that appropriate uncertainty. I'm not telling you right now that Tuesday is going to be a violent outbreak. I am telling you that the ingredients for a significant tornado threat exist in the current data, and that as we get closer and the models sharpen their picture, we could be looking at a setup that demands the same level of attention and preparation that this week demanded. So start treating it that way now. Know your shelter. Practice getting to it. Make sure that people you love in the potential corridor know to be paying attention to the weather forecast next week, not just the weekend weather. And this brings me to the thing I always come back to in situations like this one, the overnight threat. If next week's severe weather setup unfolds the way the current guidance is suggesting, there is going to be a significant overnight component to it. There always is when you have a strong low-level jet interacting with a frontal boundary during the nighttime hours in the spring across the central United States. The low-level jet strengthens after dark. The shear often improves after dark. And the people who are most at risk are the people who are asleep when the warnings go out. Y'all Call is the solution I built for exactly this. And I am going to keep talking about it every single time I see a setup like this one coming, because I genuinely cannot stand the thought of a warning going out in the middle of the night and not reaching someone in time. A direct phone call to your number when a tornado warning polygon covers your exact location. Rings and rings until you pick up. Wakes you up, gets you to your shelter. $14.95 for a full year of coverage. The link is in the description. If you are in the corridor for next week's setup and you do not have it, please set it up this weekend. Do not wait until Monday night when the storms are already firing. Here's what I need y'all to do between now and next week. First, rest this weekend, genuinely. You have been through a lot this week if you are in the affected areas, and being rested and mentally sharp when the next setup arrives matters. Second, use the weekend to assess your property. Walk your yard, look at the trees. If you have a tree that took significant wind damage this week and is leaning toward your house or a neighbor's house, call an arborist this weekend, not next Wednesday when it is too late. Third, if you live near a creek or in a known flood-prone area, check the current stream gauge readings for your local waterway right now and keep an eye on them through next week. Know what level your creek reaches flood stage at, and know approximately how long it takes to get there after heavy rain in your area. Fourth, share this video, right now, with everyone in your life who is in the southern and central plains, the mid-Mississippi Valley, the Ozarks, the Tennessee Valley. Share it so they know to be watching next week, and so that when I have more specific threat information in the next few days, they are already subscribed and already engaged. I am going to be releasing dedicated forecast content as this next setup comes into clearer focus over the weekend and into early next week. Every time the data shows me something important, you are going to hear about it. And when this thing fires, I'm going to be live right here, tracking every storm, every warning, every developing threat, all the way through until every community is on the other side of it safely. That is the commitment I make to this community every single time. That is what the Y'all Squad is. That is what this channel is. Subscribe if you are not already. Hit the bell so you do not miss a single update. Set up Y'all Call before this weekend is over. And look after each other out there, because this season is not done making demands of us. Not by a long shot. Stay safe, and I love y'all.